In this talk, I want to share with you some concepts and fundamental elements necessary to support your system coming out of chronic shame. To give credit where it is due, I want to name that these ideas at their core come from my learning with Steve Hoskinson and his approach to post-traumatic growth and feeling better in life, which is called organic intelligence. I'm going to define and describe two initial conditions that are foundational for shame to be able to melt away. Now, I use that phrase shame melting because it suggests that coming out of the freezy states of shame can be and best occurs as an automatic process that happens when the right conditions are established. For example, if you have a large block of ice and you put it outside in the sun, the ice will melt. If there are fewer clouds, then the ice melts faster than if it's a cloudy day. If the block of ice is in the sun rather than the shade, it'll melt faster. However, if it's in the sun, but outside it's only 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, then it might be very slow to melt even in the sun. The point being, the conditions impact how fast the block of ice melts. And you want to create the conditions for shame to melt rather than trying to take the metaphorical chisel and hammer to forcefully chip away at your shame. So the first condition for shame to melt is for your system to be able to be in an oriented state. So let me explain what I mean by this. Orientation means that you have awareness of, that you are connected to the environment through your physical senses. Your senses of seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and touching. To be oriented means that you have, or you could easily have, conscious awareness of what's happening around you externally. This is different from awareness of your internal going-ons, like imagining and thinking, the emotional feelings, or sensing internal states of your body. Orientation is an activity of your awareness being in the external environment rather than your internal environment. When you are oriented, your attention is easily able to be aware of your environment in a neutral or pleasurable way. You can easily be aware of what's around you without any kind of pulling back into the internal states, particularly what is going on internally that is unpleasant. Technically, orientation is always taking place in you. But often it's outside of your conscious awareness. Your biology, it is always taking in information from the environment. It is constantly being aware of what is safe and where resources for well-being are. However, orientation is often kind of pushed back to the dark recesses of one's awareness because what we are experiencing internally is taking up all of our attention. And when we are not oriented, we are less able to assess safety and where supportive resources are. So the initial condition of orientation is a practice which brings orientation more forward in your awareness so that it is dominant or could easily become the dominant awareness in any given moment. As you can imagine, shame keeps the state of being oriented from occurring more easily. With shame, whether it's an episode in a moment or an ongoing chronic experience, attention is turned inwards and generally or usually not in a neutral way. It's one thing to have the internal awareness that comes from thinking about or, say, imagining a trip to a favorite place. This is neutral or pleasant. But with shame, the thinking and imaginings are often about what's wrong with your life in general, or what's wrong with yourself in particular. When attention is drawn inward in this way, you can lose your state of being oriented. So let me use some examples to make this more clear. Let's say that you're taking a walk. While walking, you are noticing the feeling of the breeze or the feeling of the sun on your skin. You're noticing the sounds of birds or dogs or maybe children laughing. And then you see some pretty flowers. And so you have this impulse to cross the street to look at them more closely, maybe smell them. This is being in an oriented state. Now, you could be walking along and be pondering, say, your next project for work and how you're going to accomplish the task. And as you're doing so, the fragrance of night blooming jasmine wafts by you. And you immediately notice it and feel the enjoyment of it for a bit, and then return to your thinking about your work project. This too could be an oriented state. Yes, you were thinking, an internal awareness, but it wasn't so intense or too unpleasant so that you would be unable to come into the external environment. It was of the right intensity or pleasant or neutral so that you could easily come into the external environment when something enjoyable came into your awareness. To the contrary, it's also possible to be walking along, lost in thought, say about conversations you had at a party or gathering the night before, and whether you say said the right things or looked okay or how to interpret something someone said to you and whether it was a backhanded compliment or what they really meant by it, but you're not sure. And well, now you're feeling some anger and are thinking about whether you should um, or shouldn't avoid that group of people in the future because it was uncomfortable, or maybe you'll avoid it only if that uncomfortable person attends. So, make a note to yourself, make sure you know who will be present in the future, and on the thoughts go with their attendant feelings. And before you know it, you've walked your usual route and you have no recollection of anything you've walked by or anything that happened around you as you walked. That is an example of not being oriented. In this case, your attention is on the internal milieu, and it's all along the lines of what is unpleasant or challenging and what was wrong. And the unpleasant intensity is such that you're unable to be aware of the external environment. Orientation connects us to what's in our current reality. Our internal states are often connected to our memories about the past or anticipations about the future that are not connected to our current reality. Orientation begins to allow us to be aware of our environment without the distortions of our unpleasant internal states. In this way, orientation can give us a more accurate assessment of our current reality. Orientation will be more dominant when there is not a lot of intensity in our internal states. If the immediate environment also is intense, maybe due to something dangerous, then our systems will automatically respond to that, assuming that the capacities to take action and get away from danger hasn't been muted or extinguished due to past conditioning. But orientation will be there if the external environment and our internal environment is anywhere on the spectrum of neutral to pleasant. We want to support the automatic process of orienting to the environment rather than an efforted process. So the first initial condition is for that automatic orientation to the environment to be more like, say, 60% of our awareness rather than, say, 5 or 10%. And that awareness is to what is neutral or pleasant or supportive in the environment, rather than what we deem as wrong or unpleasant based on, say, past experiences. What we consider wrong or unpleasant may actually have nothing to do with the safety or the resources available in the immediate moment in the external environment. While we want orientation to be an automatic process, we can actually begin to practice it by allowing our attention, not directing our attention, but allowing our attention to notice whatever happens to come to you that is neutral or pleasant in the exact space you are in just right now. Like, you don't need to go somewhere special, but right where you sit. If your attention were to go outwards, you might notice something that is neutral or pleasant, maybe a color or a pattern, a sound, a texture, a smell. It takes seconds to bring your attention outwards to allow your system to take in what's already there that is neutral or pleasant. So the automatic state of orientation is the first initial condition that allows shame to melt. And it can be practiced at first to strengthen it. And that's what I encourage you to do. The second initial condition is the directing of our attention to what is pleasurable or feels at the very least neutral. So I've already mentioned orientation of pleasure a bit as it relates to orientation. But orientation to pleasure is its own second condition that we want to establish. Pleasure can be on the spectrum of the good intensity. It can range anywhere from neutral to exuberance and bliss. When struggling with chronic shame, we often long to feel excitement and joy, these higher intensity states of feeling good. Even though it's expected that you will want these higher pleasurable states, you really want to begin building your capacity for what is pleasurable by first expanding your capacity to recognize and even bask in what is neutral. You want to begin to allow your attention to notice and enjoy or appreciate what is neutral, and then to enjoy what feels good. In organic intelligence, there is this saying that the job is enjoyment. What this means is that it actually takes some intention, as if it's your job, to enjoy what is available to be enjoyed. Because shame takes people to the internal experience of what feels bad and painful inside, shame takes them to what's wrong. And so then they often miss the bits of enjoyment that are available. And so the second initial condition is to gently begin expanding your capacity for feeling states of enjoyment more easily by seeking and finding small moments of what is neutral and what is enjoyable. And I'm talking about simple, basic, life-supporting pleasures. Because your system is designed to automatically seek that which supports continued existence of your biology and to avoid that which harms your biology, pleasure and pain are your barometers. The feeling of pleasure means that you are satisfying some form of a biological survival need, and to that extent, you are following the right course of action. This makes feeling pleasure good, but feeling pain or suffering bad. However, ultimately, pleasure will be based on your values for the long term. In other words, what enhances your well-being in the long term. This makes the seeking of pleasure that I'm talking about not hedonism. Hedonism is a seeking of immediate, momentary pleasure at the expense of the long-term value of ongoing survival and well-being. Hedonism only cares about the immediate moment, even if it leads to pain in the next moment. So while having a night on the town, drinking and dancing till late might feel good in the moment, the hangover the next day might not feel good. So orientation to pleasure, the consideration of what helps you experience feeling better, seeking out that which creates better feelings is what I want to encourage you to do as the second initial condition that allows shame to melt. Feeling better feels better and is better. And when you feel better, shame is absent. So what can this look like in your life? How might you be able to implement this second uh, pillar, or this second initial condition? One idea is when you wake up in the morning, you can begin by opening up curiosity with a simple statement. And that statement is, I wonder what will be pleasurable or enjoyable today. Simply creating that curiosity. And you might even want to say it to yourself right now. I wonder what will be pleasurable or enjoyable today. And then you let it go. And during the day, you might notice that you are enjoying your tea, or how nice it is to come in from the hot outdoors to the air-conditioned indoors, or how much you enjoyed reading a book or listening to a podcast, or the sound of rain on your roof, the feeling of your furry friend cuddled up in your lap. None of these are super profound, super intense, super exciting, or blissful necessarily, but they may be enjoyable nonetheless. And there are an infinite number of possibilities, and possibilities that are really unique to you and what you like, what you value. So that's the first thing you can do when you wake up, is simply inviting. I wonder what will be pleasurable or enjoyable today. Then, before you go to sleep at night, you could simply ask yourself the question, what did I enjoy today? And let your mind scan through your day and see if there are any enjoyable moments in your day to reminisce about. You might even discover that you missed one or two in the moment, but now that you ask the question, what did I enjoy today? They come to mind and can be enjoyed in the remembering. This is a simple way of beginning to turn your attention and even prime your attention towards that which creates pleasure and enjoyment. And as you turn your attention towards these things, the capacity increases for experiencing even more. And as you can imagine, the more good feelings you have, the less room for shame there will be. These two initial conditions, orientation and turning your attention to pleasure, are practiced at first until they become more automatic. And as they become more automatic, your biology will begin to cooperate with your deep, heartfelt desire for shame to have less of a grip on you. You can begin to experience that shame slowly loosens, and in its place is the neutrality, the safety, the support of the immediate environment, and an increasing appreciation and enjoyment of what you value in life.